You're listening to On the Margins with me, Dan O'Sullivan.
And me, Eamon Stack-Mulvihill.
In this podcast, we will examine sites of education which are off the beaten track, non-traditional, non-typical, but diverse and exceptional, looking at learners who are often marginalised and ignored. Hello and welcome. Myself and Eamon have escaped the leafy suburbs of Castletroy and the University of Limerick today, and we're out here in Tipperary in the wonderful Cloughjordan Ecovillage. We're joined today, we're very lucky to be joined by Professor Emeritus of International Politics and Public Policy, Peadar Kirby, and also by Veronica Ryan, who is the Education Officer with Sustainable Projects Ireland. I suppose, Veronica, you were involved in the project the longest. So you kind of came here, you were involved with a group of environmentalists, and you kind of were involved from the ground floor of this project. Can you tell us a little bit about how it all got started?
Yes, absolutely. So we were a group of environmentalists living in Dublin. We were all a lot younger then, in our kind of late 20s, most of us, and we were involved in different environmental groups based in Dublin. One particularly, which is still in existence, is the Dublin Food Co-op, which is a very active a cooperative based around whole foods. So there was a lot of energy around the time and concern around the climate crisis. And we started to have meetings because we really felt we needed to take action, and we had a series of meetings and discussions around how, what type of action we should take, and this idea, this kind of vision for founding Ireland's first eco-village came about. So it was very much kind of driven by an ambitious group of young people who really wanted to initiate change and we were very passionate about it. So we founded the educational charity Sustainable Projects Ireland and got started that way.
And so I suppose back in the 90s, with Captain Planet on the den and things like that. But I suppose environmentalists, would they have been kind of othered a little bit? Were you kind of seen as daft hippies or...
Yeah, well, I think it was very much at the time, we didn't talk about the climate crisis, the climate catastrophe that we talk about now, that you see in every, mainstream media, everywhere. It's a climate catastrophe that we're living in. But at the time, really, we were kind of talking about global warming. It was kind of niche. It was alternative. It was a bit fringe, not mainstream in the same way. And also, like when you think back around that time, like nowadays in UL or in UCD or in any university, you can study sustainability. You can study, around issues around climate change and climate action. And at the time, that was really kind of, we were involved in groups that were having lectures and discussions and conferences around climate action. So that's kind of where we kind of came together and knew that we wanted to take action ourselves.
Excellent. And Peadar, you joined the community here as a member first in 2007, and did you come to live here in 2009? Have I that right? Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the project?
I suppose my own trajectory was that it was when I went on a year sabbatical to Chile in 2001-2002, and I really encountered for the first time the reality of environmental action. It was everywhere. I happened to meet, through a good friend of ours that we lived close to in the year we were in Chile, the head of the Green Party, who was a candidate in the presidential election. So I came home from that with a real sense that this was an urgent issue that I needed to address in my lecturing. I was then in DCU before I moved to UL. And I suppose all that exercise of trying to really rethink global politics in the light of this massive challenge led me to more and more realise, number one, how difficult it was going to be. I would have had to sort of turn everything I did upside down. It was of that consequence. And secondly, that really it was so important I needed to live it more than just talk about it. And that's when the possibility of, it was when I got the chair in UL that the possibility of coming to live in Cloughjordan emerged. My wife had been involved in the original meetings in Dublin that planned this. So she was very enthusiastic long before I really saw it as anything of great significance. So when I was applying for the chair in UL, she said, well, if you get that job, we're going to live in Cloughjordan Ecovillage. And by that time, I was really enthusiastic about doing that.
And when you say she said, if you get that job, we're going to live in Cloughjordan, was this were you consulted in this at all, or were you was it just handed down to you?
Well, as I say, for years she had been coming home from meetings in Dublin full of enthusiasm for this, and I was, not sharing that enthusiasm. And of course, the reality was I thought I'd be in DCU for the rest of my career. We didn't know at that stage where this eco-village might be set up, so it didn't seem very realistic. I do remember when we came back from Chile in 2002, she said to me, that eco-village that I'm interested in has now set up in a place called Cloughjordan, and I think we should buy a site there looking towards our retirement. And at that stage, suddenly this issue was more on my agenda, but again, it seemed very unrealistic. And therefore, when this job became vacant in UL and pressure was put on me to apply for it, I wasn't particularly keen on applying for it, to be very honest with you. I was very happy in DCU, but I did apply for it and I got it. And it was in that context that then it all sort of gelled together. I do remember the first time we came to visit Cloughjordan for the March members meeting in 2007 and saying to Tony, my partner, on the way down, two things will be determinative for me. First of all, the village itself. What's the feel of it? Do I like it? Do I get a good sense that I could live the rest of my life here? And then, of course, the second thing was the community, that we're going to for the first time to meet these people we might live with. How do I find them? Are these the sort of people I want to live with? And in the car on the way back to Dublin, we both said definitely. I mean, on both counts, definitely. This is a very, very lovely place. But the community seemed to be, people that shared these issues that for me were at that stage becoming very, very central. And so, from the very time that we joined then in 2007 and I came to live here in 2009, it's just been a steep learning curve. I think it's wonderful that at this stage in my life, like a day doesn't go by but that I'm not challenged and don't learn something. And we often say it is the best, personal development course you can do that never ends. And I mean, Veronica said she was an environmentalist. I always have resisted that. I don't think I'm an environmentalist. I really admire all the environmentalists I live with. But it's sort of a subject of wonder if I turn up on the farm to get my hands dirty and grow things. But my life has brought me to this point where the climate challenge, the biodiversity loss, is now the sort of central organising principle of, for me, how we have to fundamentally reorganise the whole ways in which we live, organise our economy, not just at a local level, but at a global level. And that's why I find it wonderful to be educating here, because this is the most ideal place to educate about this. Far, far, far superior than lecturing in universities. And I continue to lecture in universities, not just in Ireland, but in Spain as well. But it's bringing people here that opens their eyes both to the reality. I mean, it makes it real for people. For many people, it just isn't real enough. Of course, climate disasters are real. But what isn't real is how do we really address this? And I think that's what we show here. And that's why it's a really privileged place to do education in.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that, Peadar. There's two things that really hit home there in those words. The main one is around the community here in Cloughjordan. But one thing I want to ask both of you before we start, or either of you, is what is an eco-village and what should we know about Cloughjordan?
Well, I'll start maybe, and Paddy, you can fill in the gaps. So, if you do research on eco-villages anywhere around the world, you'll find, their focus is modelling sustainability. And when we talk about modelling sustainability, when we use the term modelling, we don't mean that we're kind of like a theme park. It's like, come and look like what it looks like, an eco-village looks like. It's actually about modelling in the scientific term, which is experimenting. So we are experimenting in different ways of living sustainably. So modelling sustainability, reducing our emissions of all kinds, not just the emissions from oil or gas, but emissions in any kind of waste, any water or our food waste, reducing all our emissions and essentially transitioning to a low carbon society. That's now we used to talk about low carbon, now people talk about zero carbon, but ultimately everything that we do here when we make choices about whether it's our travel practices or where we source our food or what we do in our land, we consider these different elements in how we live in Ecovillage.
Yeah, there are thousands of eco-villages around the world. I actually just reviewed an article for an academic journal which looked at 70 eco-villages around the world to try to identify what were the core practices. And there's a wonderful book by a US political scientist, actually, of all people, Karen Litvin, called Ecovillages, where she went around the world visiting 14 of them. This wasn't one of them, though we have since interviewed her on a webinar of ours that's on our website. But she distilled down the key lessons of all her ecovillages to 4 things: 2 E's and 2 C's. So one is ecology, obviously, we seek to live ecologically, but the other is economics. It is that we seek to provide livelihoods that are good livelihoods, not necessarily giving very big incomes, but allowing people to live well. So that's the 2 E's, the ecological and the economic. And the 2 C's then are community, which you've just mentioned, which is absolutely central. She puts the other one, she calls it consciousness. I mean, in some eco-villages they talk about spirituality, but it is, I suppose, the deeper value system that lies at the base of our community that we've done a lot of work on here. And interestingly, in the academic journal article that I just reviewed, exactly those 4 themes were the ones to emerge from their examination of 70 different eco-villages around the world. So those are, it seems to me that that's absolutely central to what it is to be an eco-village. If you just walk in here from the main street, you'd say, well, this is a very sort of unusual suburb of Cloughjordan, where their houses look very different and there's a lot of flourishing nature. But behind that, of course, is a whole conception of us, as Veronica has said, trying to live very differently. So we sometimes talk about ourselves as an eco-neighbourhood, but it is a neighbourhood of a very, very different type to the average neighbourhood you'll find in most towns or cities, certainly in the developed world.
We were very blessed to be shown around the place by Veronica. Thank you very much, Veronica. And while we were walking around the village here, I very much was reminded of Slovenia, because I spent some time there after running away from my life at one point. And even the design of the place and the layout, the nature trails, there's a better word for that, isn't there, Veronica?
Wildlife corridor.
Wildlife corridor, yeah. I very much got that feel about the place, and maybe much like your return from Chile, I'd be prompted into eco-activism now. But another thing that struck me as absent that you'd normally get this time of year is cut grass. Do you know the smell of cut grass? There's some sort of a chemical that you smell, and very much kind of invokes feelings of the summer in me. But it also makes me think of the Philip Larkin poem, cut grass lies frail beneath, brief is the breath, mown stalks exhale, long, long to death. And I suppose in the poem he's going through his existential crisis and facing death. But in the absence of that smell, the Earth's existential crisis is kind of absent. So in a roundabout way, that smell that would normally invoke such happy feelings of summer, the absence of it is actually much better in terms of rewilding and everything. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm going on too much.
Yeah, well, absolutely. As you say, we did a lovely walk this morning in the sunshine, and the way we care for our land is absolutely fundamental to our approach living here. So we see ourselves as sharing the land with the other living creatures that live on the land with us. So we coexist as such. So we've designed the site. The master plan was designed in such a way that we have a residential area, an enterprise area which we're based in now, an area for the community farm, and then an area for biodiversity, which is where we have our woodland, which is where we planted 17,000 native Irish trees. And we've connected the woodland throughout the site with other community gardens, using what we call the wildlife corridors, which people can walk and cycle around. So, and we see the car as a visitor, so that we have very narrow roads only in the residential area where cars can go in and out. So, from that perspective, we're not dominating nature. We're not tidying nature up and mowing it and keeping it out of the way, and having the focus on making life convenient for our cars and our houses and our human lifestyle. We see ourselves as coexisting, and therefore we let the land, where possible, develop in a wild way. We recently did a biodiversity audit about a year ago, and we're very proud of the fact that we have several protected species that have returned to the site, and even some species that haven't been detected for quite some time. So it's very important to us.
Like UCD professors.
Yeah, plenty of them. So from that perspective, it's we see ourselves sharing our land, and that creates a very different environment, in which is the environment you've just discussed. Yeah.
Okay, and Peadar, I don't know, I'm going to go a bit political on you, if it's okay. So there's an organisation that we won't go into too much, but revolving around Irish republicanism, and they say Chucky our law. But then there was feminist groups who kind of adapted it and made a double entendre, and they said Chucky our mana. And then in terms of a rewilding movement of native Irish species of plant, there's seed bombs that you can buy, and you throw them out, which sounds very political on it, seed bombs as opposed to actual bombs, but that you can throw out into a field, and the native Irish plants will regrow hopefully from the seeds. And the saying behind that is Chucky our blah. So I've gone through all types of political models there. Have you any commentary on that?
Well, I mean, one thing that strikes me is it's the abuse of our native language, which is to me very central to developing a new consciousness about the way in which it's not just our relationship to nature, we're part of nature, and we rely on nature, and we have huge responsibilities towards nature. And that comes through much more in speaking Irish. I mean, I did a little interview with Liam McCoy, one of our leading novelists, about Irish as an ecological language. It's on our website. And in so many ways, Irish is a much, much more ecological language than English, and therefore it is, for some of us here in the Ecovillage, it is a very, very much part of developing that new consciousness. We had a young student from the Netherlands here doing her master's last year on how we relate to the other than human, and this she picked up on, the importance of going back to our indigenous language. And I have another student coming next week from Glasgow, who's again doing a very similar type of project, which is how do we expand our concept of community so that it includes all the other species. The community isn't limited to the 100 human members, 100 plus human members that we're here. And again, he's touched into that, the importance of going back, because I mean, I suppose the issue of colonialism and all that it has robbed us of comes up for people who really get deep into these issues. It has colonialism has left us with a way of looking at the world around us that's exploitative. It's there for us, and we treat it as an object to be plundered, not as a community of other species with whom we need to find ways of flourishing, or it's going to lead to disaster for all of us. And now suddenly we human species are waking up to this, but we've gone so far down that road that there's huge amounts. And this comes back to your question. This is politics. This is politics in the very best sense. When I studied politics in UCD many decades ago, my professor Fergal O'Connor, a Dominican priest, defined politics, and I always use this in my career of teaching politics, as creating community. How far our contemporary politics has got from that. But politics is that action of all of us together, particularly through the leaders that we have some influence on choosing, that hopefully brings us together, and not just us as human beings, but now us and the many millions of species that we share this planet with.
So, to use another Irish word there, because you mentioned community, could you tell us a little bit about the concept of the mehel?
Yeah, the mehel, of course, is just an ordinary concept in Irish, where we get together to help our neighbours. All of us who grew up in Ireland, certainly in my generation, were used to seeing people out in the fields helping their neighbours, and we use it as a way of drawing the members into the many tasks that we need to do to care for the land. So every weekend, some weeks we have multiple mehels that's tending to the various tasks that need to be done in caring for the land. So that's simply appropriating and giving new life to a practice that our Irish ancestors, right down almost to the present day, just took for granted, that we help one another.
And I suppose in doing so then, because you have to rely on each other a little bit more, you're not using heavy machinery all the time, just possibly a better sense of community then within the Ecovillage.
Well, I think, in myriads of different ways, we are all the time taking actions that bring us together. Like, after all, we have a district heating system that heats all our houses, and we run it ourselves. And if the district heating system crashes, we all suffer. We've no way of heating water apart from boiling a kettle in our own homes. So that's just an example of the ways in which our lives have become very, very interdependent. And not a day goes by but we don't get multiple emails saying, anybody going to Nina today? Can somebody take something to Dublin for me? Anybody got a loan at this, that, or the other? Or the other, we've had many of them recently for some reason, I'm giving away this, first come, first take, all sorts of things, furniture and tools, etc. So, a culture of interdependence is one where we need one another. And I think on a number of occasions here, storms would be one, COVID was another, of course, where the reality of people looking after each other as an elderly member of the community. Like during COVID, I was very touched by the fact that younger members would knock at the door saying, I'm going to the supermarket, is there anything I can get for you? That was happening all the time. So you got a sense that you're thought about and you're valued. I remember a neighbour of ours, when she was dying 2 years ago, Mary Keogh, the young people, the kids used to love going into her, not because their parents told them, well, you must visit Mary, she isn't well, but because they loved her company and she loved their company. Now you can't pay for that sort of level of connection. So that's community.
So as we're talking on connection, and I'm going back to Slovenia now again, we were talking about, what is it, a dark area?
Yeah.
But there's no light pollution, dark sky area. And there's one other area, they're great for fellas who like their telescopes, but when I was in Slovenia, there was going to be a meteor storm. So we went down to the riverbank and we weren't allowed to light a fire because the Slovenians are quite I was going to say eco-conscious, but who am I talking to? But you have a fire pit here.
Well, we have a dark sky bowl, is what we call it. So yeah, we are very, very protective of our night skies here. So we have a wonderful dark sky bowl that's built beside the amphitheatre, which is a place that you can go and lie out on the grass, and you're kind of supported in a way that you can look up and enjoy the night skies. We currently have no street lighting here in Ecovillage, but that is soon to change because we've received funding through the Department of the Environment to install biodiversity-friendly street lighting. So we're soon to be breaking ground on that infrastructure project, and the lighting is designed in a way that it saves energy because it doesn't shine light up into the sky, which causes light pollution in the first place. Secondly, it shines light downwards, which means that you're actually you're both protecting the night sky but also not wasting energy. And then thirdly, the lumen that's used in the lights themselves is designed to not interrupt the activities of nocturnal animals. And one thing we're very excited about is that Tipperary County Council has agreed that when they're upgrading the street lighting on the main street of Cloughjordan, that they're going to use similar lumen, and in which case the whole village of Cloughjordan will have this low lumen, and we'll be able to apply. You can actually apply for dark sky status, so that's something that we aspire to once the new infrastructure is in, and once the street lighting on the main street has been reduced in lumen wise. That's great.
I mean, and the level of innovation that seems to be going on here is wonderful. There's a number of businesses in the Ecovillage as well. No, not to trigger your anti-capitalist impulses, but can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so in fact, that's one of the nice things. There's a lot of kind of grassroots businesses that have grown up around people who've come here, moved here, and really are committed to living in a more environmentally friendly way, but also need to make a living. So we have the community supported agriculture farm, which was founded by a member here who is the farmer for it's called a CSA, so it's a member owned farm. We're all members of the farm, and we pay a monthly subscription throughout the year, regardless of whether the farmer's having a good season or a bad season, and we commit to supporting the farm over the course of the year. And then we collect our vegetables twice a week from a local collection point up on the main street. We have members of the farm, not just from the Ecovillage, but from the main street as well. So it's a great way to reduce our food miles significantly, but also have access to very seasonal, local, healthy organic veg. So that would be the CSA, the Community Supported Agriculture Farm. And then we also have Rye Bakery, and it's bakehouse and bread school. So they run by a couple here who live in the Ecovillage, also run a business whereby they bake bread once a week, and we're all members of the bread club. We similarly support the business throughout the year, and we collect our bread once a week, which is baked and handmade and baked within the Ecovillage, and they also actually run bread making courses as well. And then we have a project called the Red Gardens, which is a research, education and development garden run by a resident called Bruce Darrell, who is actually a YouTuber, but ultimately he's actually a grower of vegetables, and he approaches his growing in a very scientific way, and he runs a YouTube channel where he shares all of his learnings through regular videos that he posts and shares for people all over the world to learn more about food growing at a small scale. Okay, and the woodland here. When I was walking around, I felt kind of immersed in the place, and really enjoyed it. And there was a whole lot of smells that were different native flowers and whatnot that I don't know what they are because I'm used to living in manicured kind of suburb of Castletroy. Can you tell us a little bit about the woodland? And we came across, is it a labyrinth? Yes. Do you want to tell us something about that?
Well, the woodland is our aid to biodiversity. So, as Veronica was saying, we planted 17,000 trees. Many of those were ash trees. I mean, this is what the advice we got at the beginning. We planted about 2010, was it 2009, 2010? That way. Yeah. And then we had to dig up about 80% of the trees, and now we planted mostly oak. we're very much advised by the Department of Agriculture in this. And in the centre of that, we decided to build a labyrinth. Now, a labyrinth isn't a maze. A labyrinth is a well-recognised pathway for meditative walking, whereby it takes you in various routes until you reach the centre. There's something called a Celtic maze, which is the one we built. You can find them in various parts of Ireland. There's one, for example, in Glendalough. There's one in France. I remember seeing one on the floor of Chartres Cathedral. Of course, it's hidden because there's chairs there. So I find that a wonderful place, because it's not just that walking the labyrinth itself is very meditative, but because you're surrounded by trees and by birds singing. I mean, it really is a sacred space in the best sense of that word. And that we leave wild in the way in which we allow it to develop itself. But of course, leaving it wild means we also have to care for how of what its needs are. And it is really a magical place, the whole of the woodland area, and particularly the labyrinth in the centre of it.
Okay. We also passed an amphitheatre. You do plays there, you have concerts. We get political again. Are NECAP allowed to play there? Can you tell us a little bit about the amphitheatre?
So the amphitheatre was originally, when we were building the infrastructure of the site, we had to remove a lot of the topsoil into a mound so that we could put in all of the connecting underground pipes for the district heating system. And after we built our houses, we kind of looked across at the site and saw this big topsoil mound, and we had a series of meetings as to what we would do with it. And so a decision came about where we would build an amphitheatre. Because when we started out with this project, we wanted to meet the needs of the people that came here in many different ways, and the kind of cultural, creative needs of the community are as important as all the other needs. So having a focus to express and engage in our cultural and creative sides was very important to us. It's actually a Thomas McDonagh project. So it was especially funded. Is
that the 1916 boy?
That's the very one, the poet, who's actually a local of Cloughjordan, and so we got funding to build this amphitheatre along the side of the topsoil mound. And Cloughjordan Arts is a small arts organisation that was set up by people from the community, and they run a summer programme of events throughout the summer. Of course, we do sometimes get rained off, but I always say that it's a testament to our enduring optimism that we built an outdoor amphitheatre in the first place, and we've had so many beautiful, incredible evenings out there enjoying, the programming and the different groups and musicians that come to visit.
And when is the festival?
So we don't have a festival planned this year, but we were waiting for the schedule of events to be rolled out really quite soon.
Okay, give me a shout if it's
I'll let you know.
And then you have a number of educational programs?
That's right. So, our mission as the educational charity is to be to build and develop a sustainable village, but also to act as an education enterprise and research resource for all. So we welcome groups from all over Ireland and abroad, from America and Germany and France. So we welcome secondary school students, and we have a lot of third level, and then community groups and NGOs will come to learn about the work that we do here. And then we have a very active research program of researchers from BA to MA to PhDs that like to come to learn about our project. And one thing that I didn't say when we were out on the tour is that about 10 years ago we had two researchers who came along to us and said, okay, so you've been out here living sustainably or looking to live sustainably, so we're going to test you on how are you getting on. So they wrote a questionnaire, a very detailed questionnaire, which was all focused on everything to do with our built land area, how we build our houses, our food practices, our travel practices, water, and everybody in the Ecovillage was encouraged to complete the questionnaire. And at the time, they also gave the questionnaire to 79 other villages and towns across Ireland. And when the results came back in, they were measuring our ecological footprint. And at the time, if we were going to live within the capacity of the planet to sustain itself, no individual could use more than 1.87 global hectares of land to sustain their lifestyle. And that was at the time. That was, of course, that's changed since the population has increased globally. When the results came in, we came in at 2.03 global hectares. So we were slightly still, we were slightly above the ideal number. So we were still living slightly outside the capacity of the planet to sustain itself. But what was interesting was the results that came back from the other 79 settlements in Ireland. And these are just, average Irish communities, not millionaire lifestyles or anything like that. And they were coming in at 4.35 global hectares. So in other words, you needed 2 planets to sustain the lifestyle of the average Irish person. And for us, that was a real kind of moment, it was a real milestone, because it allowed us to realise that the things that we're doing here, the things that we welcome educational groups here to see, whether it's a community farm or whether it's the way, a woodland or our sustainable urban drainage system or our green building, all of these different elements combined significantly reduce our impact on the planet. So if they're, we don't suggest that everybody goes out and builds ecovillages. What we suggest is what Peadar said at the beginning, is that people come here and they see different elements of what it's like to live in an ecovillage and what the different elements are, and then they bring those elements back into their communities, and we have eco-communities across Ireland. So it's a way of people just bringing in different aspects of the lifestyle that we live here into their communities, and that way we can, as a country, we'll be able to reduce our impact on the planet and our ecological footprint.
Okay, go ahead.
Lovely. On that, and the educational opportunities you provide, one of the reasons that I've got in touch with you, as mentioned before, is through the Design a Sustainable Eco-Village for 2050 project that was done by Epistem. Would you mind speaking a little bit to that, if you got any learnings even from that? Because from my perspective and being involved in the project, it was great to see students like visions for the future on that, and did Cloughjordan as a village maybe even take any learnings from that yourselves?
So we were invited by the organisers of the competition through the Hunt Museum to actually get involved. So when they were kind of launching the project initially, they were looking to involve TY students across Limerick, and they had this the competition to design the sustainable village for 2050. And what they asked the Ecovillage to get involved in was we actually did a recording to share with the schools that were getting involved to give them a sense of what was possible. So we the recording shared exactly what we've talked about, everything that we do here. So it was a way to kind of help students see this not just as a vision, but it can be a reality. Mm-hmm. So when the students then went off to make their designs, I thought it was great, because I went to the award ceremony, and it was great to talk to the students, because several of them came here, and then several of them kind of used the resource to guide their plans, but it allowed them to see almost like a springboard as to say, okay, well, you can do this, we know you can do this because we've seen it in Ecovillage, but we also want to do, have other plans. And it was really lovely to see how, creative and, how much blue sky thinking there was around, what was possible. The winning school had an amazing design. It was absolutely magnificent, and there was no stopping that, the students that were involved in, they saw enormous potential. But I think what's most important is that you can see that it's something that is achievable, mm-hmm. and that, this is something that people can aspire to, people can, make change in their day-to-day lives, and therefore make change. And even if you take on 1 or 2 projects, and even with these students that were participating in this, if they were looking at the full design of an entire village, but even if they look at different elements and work within their school or their community to make changes, then you look back and you say, well, that was one change and that made a difference, and then you can add to that and grow. So I think what's most important about that project was making these ideas of reality, and allowing the students to see that what is possible. And of course, all of them, I asked each one of them, mind, would you like to live in your ecovillage? And they're like, completely, definitely. They wanted to go and live in the ecovillages that they had designed, which was lovely.
Lovely.
So the farm here is agroecological. What does that mean?
I understand agroecology to mean that we use trees to do what more conventional farmers would use fertilizers and chemical inputs to do. Don't ask me how that works, but we did recently on the farm plant 2,000 trees. And I do know from when I was involved in the past, I was involved in getting a grant around agroforestry. So it is an ongoing theme in the farm.
Okay. And do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to say that I think one of the farm is obviously focused on growing food for the community, but in their practices of growing food, they are also very focused on the health of the soil itself to ensure that the soil is nutritious, because the vegetables grown in nutritious soils will be tastier and more nutritious themselves, but also they care for the biodiversity of the farm land as part of their day-to-day practices, so that they kind of see the health of the farm land as integral to the overall health of the farm itself. So that would be good. Neither of us are farmers, so I see we need to farming to get a more detailed answer on that.
Well, I suppose we're getting ready to kind of finish up. So is there anything you want to add before we kind of get there?
Well, I think one of the things that you often say, Patrick, that we haven't touched on yet is what's really important, and we both experience this a lot when we're working with all the visiting groups that come. For us, it's what's rooted in our work here is actually hope. Is essentially that. There's a lot of concern out there about what's happening in the planet. There's a lot of worry, there's a lot of fear, and for us, our day-to-day lives and our engagement and interaction with people who come here is to try and communicate practical solutions and ultimately hope and possibility and ways forward and ways to address our own feelings of fear and concern, but also in a very practical way. So on a day-to-day basis, I think that's for us and working in our project, that's one of the most important things, that we can bring people here who can say, look, a different way is possible, a different way of living is possible, and that just makes it feels so meaningful, because people go, yeah, okay, that makes sense, it is accessible, and that's really fundamental to our work.
Yeah, the thing I'd add that we haven't touched on is our governance system, and I think a lot of our success comes down to the fact that we have a very flat system. We don't all the time have to go asking permission of the board of directors, for example. Why? Because we have divided up into groups that are given a remit by members. So the members say to our education group that Veronica and myself are very much involved in, you're responsible for the education and outreach of the Ecovillage. And then once every 3 months, all of the various groups that are working here will write a report on what they've been doing over the 3 months, and that is sent to all members. And then at the next members' meeting, because we have monthly members' meetings, people can raise issues, they can question the coordinators of the different groups, etc. So there's accountability, and yet there's immense creativity that allows for. In terms of community, we use the word community, but community has to be worked at all the time. Asquailga dermid ska akela avara nadini, which is, I think, great richness to that. And I've learned an awful lot. In fact, I wrote an article in Irish very recently just talking about that since I came to live here 15 years ago, I've really begun to realise ska akela avaramud. But also that takes, you can't just rely on it. This takes constant work. We're all a group of individuals, and individuals get hurt, and we've had difficult times, and it's like an art to keep progressing a community that can flourish, where each individual can really feel they have the freedom to flourish and to find their own talents. I mean, that's amazing. But also that we hold together as a community. We don't fragment, and that we do it together. We own this land together, we nurture this land together, and we seek to become ever more sustainable, to learn the ways in which all of us as human beings have to live sustainably on this planet with the other species with which we share it. So all that, I mean, it seems to be far away from governance, but it does seem to be, it comes back as one essential feature of that is the way in which you develop a governance system that is adequate to that task of allowing us all to flourish together, and the together part is the challenging part.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of work, and it's ongoing, you know, and there's a lot of people who are, you know, there's a project that attracts people who have very, very strong opinions and, you know, very strong beliefs, and so it's working together to ensure that every voice is heard, but also that we move forward to make decisions, because we make decisions on consensus, so we have a consensus decision-making model, so it's hard work, and, you know, you need to bring, you know, your own energy and conviction on what you believe is the way forward, but also be able to listen to others and to, as a community, make the decisions on how we move forward collectively, which is challenging, but ultimately we move forward in a way that we're bringing in the voices of the majority of the members, which is really a key to, I think, why we're still here and why we've succeeded or are continuing to succeed on our journey.
So guys, thank you very much for today, both for the interview and showing us around. I think there is a certain amount of othering that goes on with environmentalists. And I think what you're doing here, modelling so much of it, there's a lot of everything in education. There's a lot to do with see it to be it. And I think you're doing a great job of that here. And I think there's maybe a lot of angst about it's too late, there's nothing we can do, but I think you're really modelling that is not the case, and there's still hope for the planet, and you're leading the way, and we thank you for that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of On the Margins.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow and subscribe on all your usual platforms or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can also check us out on our website, aidonthemargins.com, for more info, content and upcoming events. See you soon.